"Get her out of my house," the Duke of Yatesbury said, and the words tasted lash even as he spoke them. "Tonight. Before I have to look at her again." His cousin Hollis stood at his shoulder, all sorrow and patience, holding out the letter as though it grieved him to do it. The letter that damned her. The letter in a hand that was not hers, though Edmund Ashcombe, 6th Duke of Yatesbury, did not know that yet, and would not know it for 6 long years. The maid stood in the middle of the great hall, small and straight-backed in her grey dress, and she did not weep. That was the thing that would haunt him. She did not beg. Rosalind Vale only looked at him with a steadiness that a lesser man might have called insolence and a wiser man would have called truth, and she said, "I never took a shilling from you, your grace, nor ever would. But you have already decided, and so I will go. You wrote to my creditors," Edmund said, holding to the anger because the anger was easier than the strange, sinking thing beneath it. "You carried tales of this house into the town. You sold what you overheard in my study." "I did none of those things." Her voice did not shake. "One day you will know it. I only hope it does not cost you too dearly to learn." Hollis made a small, mournful sound, the sound of a man pained by another's disgrace. Edmund did not see the flicker of satisfaction his cousin hid behind his handkerchief. He saw only the maid, and the maid was already turning, already gathering her thin shawl about her shoulders, already walking toward the door with her chin level and her eyes dry. He should have stopped her. Something in him, some quiet and unregarded part, rose up to stop her. He crushed it. A duke could not be seen to waver over a servant who had betrayed his trust. So he stood at the head of his own hall, cold and tall and certain, and he let Rosalind Vale walk out into the November dark, and he told himself he felt nothing at all. He was lying to himself. But that, too, he would not learn for 6 years. The truth of it was that Edmund had noticed her long before there was any letter. He had noticed the way she hummed under her breath when she thought the corridors empty, and the way she set his cold study to rights without being asked, and the way she once caught his ledger before it slid from the desk and handed it back with a curtsy and the ghost of a smile. He had noticed, and being a duke, and being lonely in the particular way of men who have everything and are trusted by no one, he had let himself, on one warm and reckless evening, notice her too much. They had spoken by the low fire in the library after the house had gone to sleep. He had told her things he told no one of his dead brother, of the debts he had inherited, of the loneliness of a title that made every honest word suspect. She had listened and answered plainly, and for 1 hour he had not been a duke, but only a man. He had taken her hand. He had not meant it to be more than that. But the fire was low and the hour was late and the world outside the door was cruel, and in the morning he had woken ashamed, not of her, but of himself, of having laid his loneliness at the feet of a woman who could not refuse a duke without risking her place. He had resolved to make it right, to provide for her, to speak with her honourably. He had gone about it clumsily, coldly, saying too little, and before he could find the words, Hollis had come to him with the letter. The letter said the maid was faithless, that she had spun the Duke's private confidences into coin, that the warm hour in the library had been calculation, a scheme to snare a fortune. Edmund, sick with self-reproach and half believing himself deserving of any disaster, had swallowed it whole. It was easier, in a wretched way, to believe her false than to believe himself a fool who had frightened away the one person who had ever spoken to him as an equal. So he cast her out. And Hollis, who owed money he could not pay, and who stood next in line to inherit Yatesbury should its duke die without an heir, folded the false letter away and smiled behind his handkerchief and waited. The winters came and went. Edmund did not marry. He told the matchmaking mothers of the county that he had no wish for a wife, and it was true, though he could not have said why. He grew colder and quieter and more feared, and the great house of Yatesbury grew colder with him. He rode his lands alone. He sat in the library he no longer liked, and sometimes his eye went to the low chair by the fire where a grey-dressed woman had once sat and listened, and he made himself look away. He did not know that Rosalind Vale had walked 12 miles that November night with everything she owned in one bundle. He did not know that she had found work at last in the far village of Thornwell, mending and washing, keeping herself by the strength of 2 hands and a will that would not break. He did not know that in the spring following her dismissal she had borne a son with dark hair and grey eyes, and had named him Thomas, and had told no one whose he was, not to shield the Duke, whom she had every reason to curse, but to shield the boy from a world that would call him a bastard and a servant's shame. She raised him plain and proud and taught him his letters by candle end, and she never once spoke ill of his father, because she had loved the man for one honest hour and could not bring herself to poison a child against a memory. 6 years passed. And then, on ordinary grey morning, the truth came for the Duke of Yatesbury by the plainest of doors. It came in the person of Mrs. Agnes Fenn, who had kept house at Yatesbury for 30 years and was dying, and knew it, and would not go to her grave with the thing she carried. She asked to see the Duke. He came to her small clean room above the kitchens, and he sat by her bed, and she took his hand in her dry old one and said, "Your Grace, I have a sin to confess, and it is not mine, but I have kept it, and that is nearly as bad." "Then confess it, Agnes, and be easy," he said, gentler than he was with anyone living. "The maid, Rosalind, the one you sent away." The old woman's eyes were wet. "She never wrote those letters. I saw who did. I saw Mr. Hollis at your desk by candlelight, copying her hand from the laundry lists the week before he brought you that paper. I was afraid of him, Your Grace. He said he would see me turned out with no character if I spoke, and I was old and had nowhere to go, so I held my tongue. And I have hated myself every day since." Edmund did not move. The room seemed very far away and very quiet. 6 years fell through him like a stone down a well. At the bottom of it lay the memory of a grey-dressed woman saying, "One day you will know it. I only hope it does not cost you too dearly to learn." "You are certain," he said at last, and his voice was not his own. "As certain as I am of my own name. There is more, Your Grace." The old woman's grip tightened. "The girl was with child when she left. I knew it before she did, the way old women know. Whether she carried it to term or lost it on the road, God knows. But she went out of this house carrying, and you the only man she'd ever looked at twice. I could not go without telling you." For a long moment the Duke of Yatesbury said nothing. Then he rose, and Agnes Fenn saw a change come over his cold face that she had not seen in all her 30 years. A breaking, and behind the breaking, something like the man he might have been. "Rest now," he told her, and his hand was steady though the rest of him was not. "You have done a hard and good thing. You will want for nothing here for as long as you live. I swear it." He went out. He did not go to the library. He went to his study, and he took down the false letter from the locked drawer where he had kept it all these years. Kept it, he understood now. Not as evidence, but as a wound he could not stop touching, and he laid it beside a laundry list in Rosalind's true hand, and even to his untrained eye the forgery was plain, the loops too careful, the pressure wrong. He had ruined a good woman on the strength of an hour's cowardice and his cousin's greed, and somewhere in the world there might be a child, his child. He found Hollis in the yellow drawing-room at his ease, a glass of the Duke's claret in his hand. Edmund laid the 2 papers on the table between them without a word. Hollis's face did the thing that guilty faces do. For one instant the mask slipped, and beneath the sorrowing cousin was the frightened, grasping man who had gambled a woman's life against a title he coveted. Then he tried to speak, to explain, to spin, and found the Duke's eyes on him, and found no words at all. "You copied her hand from the laundry lists," Edmund said quietly. "You did it because you owed money you could not pay, and because a duke without an heir has a cousin who stands to inherit. You broke a woman on the wheel of your own debts, and you let me be the one who turned it. Do not trouble to deny it. I have Agnes, I have the papers, I have 6 years of my own folly staring me in the face." "Edmund," Hollis began, "you will be gone from this house within the hour, and you will never again cross its threshold. I will settle your debts, not for your sake, but so that no other soul suffers for your dishonesty. And you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you had a duke's trust and a duke's blood in your veins, and you traded them both for coin, and it bought you nothing but disgrace." He turned away. "Go." Hollis went. He was not humbled all at once. Such men rarely are. But he lived out his years small and shunned and dependent on the very charity of the man he had wronged, and that, in the end, is its own long humbling. It took the Duke 3 weeks to find her. He did it himself, on horseback, village by village, asking after a dark-haired woman named Vale who kept herself by mending. He found her in Thornwell, in a whitewashed cottage at the edge of a green, with a line of washing bright behind it, and a small pair of boots drying on the step. She opened the door with a needle still in her hand, and when she saw who stood there her face went white, and then very still, that same steadiness, unbroken by 6 years of hardship. Behind her skirts a boy peered out, dark-haired, grey-eyed, no higher than her hip, clutching the hem of her apron and studying the tall stranger with a frank and fearless curiosity that Edmund knew, with a lurch of his whole heart for his own. "Your Grace," Rosalind said. "Only that." "I know the truth," Edmund said. His voice would not stay level. "I have known it 3 weeks, and I have thought of nothing else. It was my cousin's hand in that letter, not yours. You never took a shilling. You never carried a tale. You told me I would learn it one day, and that it might cost me dearly. Rosalind, it has cost me 6 years of your life, and I have come to say what I should have said at the first, and what I have no right to expect you to believe." He took off his hat, this proud and feared man, and stood bareheaded before a mending woman's door. "I was a coward and a fool. I wronged you past forgiving, and I have never, in 6 years, stopped seeing you in the chair by my fire." For a moment she did not answer. The boy tugged her apron and whispered, "Mama, who is the gentleman?" And Edmund's throat closed entirely. "His name is Thomas," Rosalind said quietly, and she watched the Duke's face as she said it, watched him understand. "He is 6 years old this spring. He has your eyes, your Grace. I never told him a hard word of you. I could not, for 1 hour once. You were the kindest man I ever knew, and I chose to remember that man instead of the one who sent me away. Foolish of me, perhaps." "Not foolish," Edmund said, unsteadily. He knelt down there in the mud of the cottage path so that his eyes were level with the boy's. "Hello, Thomas." "You're very tall," Thomas observed. "So I am told. Are you a soldier?" "No." "I am." Edmund looked up at Rosalind, and something passed between them that 6 years had not been able to kill. "I am your father," he said. "If your mother will permit it, if she can find it in her to forgive a man who does not deserve forgiving." Rosalind's steadiness broke at last, not into weeping but into something softer, the letting go of a grief long carried alone. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "It was never you I could not forgive. It was the loneliness of it. Of doing all this by myself and loving the memory of a man I thought I would never see again." "You need never be lonely again," Edmund said. "Not you, and not the boy. I have wasted 6 years I cannot give you back. Let me be honest for all the rest, no hour by the fire, but a lifetime. Come home, Rosalind, not as a maid, never again as a maid. Come home as my wife, and let me spend what years I have making right what I broke." She looked at him a long moment, at the grey in his hair that had not been there 6 years ago, at the plainness of his coming, at the way he still knelt in the mud beside their son. "You would marry a mending woman," she said. "The county will talk." "The county has talked of me for years, and I have never once cared for its opinion," Edmund said. "Let it talk. I mean to have the only 2 people in the world I have ever wanted to come home to. Say yes, Rosalind, I am begging you, and I have never begged anyone for anything." And Rosalind Vale, who had walked 12 miles into the dark with everything she owned in one bundle, and had raised a duke's son by the light of candle ends, and had never once let the world break her, Rosalind Vale reached down and took the Duke of Yatesbury's hand, the way she had taken it once by a low fire long ago, and drew him up out of the mud and said, yes. They were married quietly in the little church at Thornwell, and if the county talked, no one at Yatesbury ever heard the Duke or the Duchess pay it the smallest heed. Thomas grew up in the great house that would one day be his, tall and dark-haired and fearless, taught his letters now by both his parents, running the cold corridors until they were cold no longer. Agnes Fenn lived out her days warm and forgiven in her clean room above the kitchens, and died at peace. And on winter evenings the Duke and Duchess of Yatesbury sat together by the library fire in the 2 low chairs, his hand in hers, and the man who had once been the loneliest in the county was lonely no more. He had learned the truth too late to spare her the hardship. But he had learned it in time to spend a lifetime being worthy of it, and that Rosalind told him once, her head against his shoulder and the fire low, was all she had ever truly wanted from him. Not the title, not the house. Only the man who had sat with her in the firelight and told her the truth of his heart. That man had come home at last, and he was never going away again.